Why on earth would anyone want or need an airgun? Hello and welcome to AAR on Air. Now, a comment like that will start all kinds of keyboard warriors off on a single-minded crusade of one sort or another, and after 3 years of doing this, I know where the comments delete button is. Oh, the power. So, before we start, this is an airgun channel, if it hasn't already slipped your attention, and naturally I am pro airguns. That doesn't mean by association that I am anti any other types. And of course, we need to remember different countries have different laws around all types of guns. Some can have full firearms and some have far greater restrictions. And I can already hear the sound of patriotic flags waving. I'm gonna tell him! And 2A comments, and I understand that. And as always, please guys, this is not a political forum. It is about fun and community. No! As I've said, at the end of the day, this is about airguns. So, firearms, restrictions, Second Amendment, longbows and testosterone-driven comments to one side, why would anyone want to have an airgun? Certainly as opposed to a firearm. At this point, if you listen closely, you can hear the clicking of keyboards as the comments start to coming in before they've even taken the time to listen to the rest of the programme. What? Yep, believe me, they do. But for the rest of you genuinely interested, intelligent individuals, let's look at a sort of top 10 reasons why, shall we? In no particular order. Let's start with ammunition. You see, not only is this often a lot easier to obtain for airguns with fewer restrictions, it comes in higher quantities for the price, making it very cost effective. Let's take a Glock pistol as an example here, and let's look at a box of 9mm ammo, shall we? Then let's buy it in a reasonable bulk purchase to try and keep the costs down. So a box of 1,000 rounds is going to cost you an average of about $150. Naturally, it's more expensive if you buy in smaller amounts. Alternatively, or indeed additionally, you could buy a Glock in either BB format or pellet form, in which case the ammo for the CO2 powered item will cost you around $4.25 for 1,500 steel BBs, or around $10 for around 500 lead pellets, plus of course the CO2 to power it. This will run you around 36 cents each. Again, if you buy in, say, a bulk of 50 a time. Depending on the gun you are using, you'll usually get between 1 and 2 of those per 100 shots. So let's do a cost per 100 shot equivalent, shall we? 9mm are going to be around $15 per 100. BBs, 28 cents per 100, plus CO2 at 36 cents each. That gives us a total of 64 cents per 100 approximately. Pellets, on the other hand, are going to be $2 for about 100, plus that 36 cents for the CO2. All of this is not only a win for the airgun on cost per shot, but more importantly means more range or trigger time, which can't be a bad thing for that all-important practice. OK, whilst we're talking cost, let's also point out that a pistol such as that Glock 17 we've used in this example is only a fraction of the cost of the real firearm Glock. Taking that even further, there are air pistols out there for less than $50 or £50 that are really pretty good and will also give you that practice time at ultra low budget prices. Now again, I hear the keyboard warriors warming up. I'm telling him! Yes, you can spend an awful lot more on airguns than £50 or $50 if you're getting heavily into it, and depending upon your preferred discipline. But you can spend thousands and thousands on firearms, so step away from the keyboard, guys. So far, so good. But what about the big point that is already being shouted at the screen?
Power.
Power.
More power.
Power. Airguns are only toys. They're only toys, you know. Well, of course, power is nothing without control. And there are circumstances where you can have too much power.
What?
Really? Yes, you can. You see, not everyone can just get into a P150 and drive out into the desert and shoot some big old wild boar at 1,000 yards. Because we don't have P150s, wild boars, or that amount of spare land doing nothing. We have pigeons or rats in a back garden around the size of a postage stamp that we can walk to, or we have farm buildings with smaller vermin that, if shot with anything more than a low-powered rifle, would go through the quarry and damage the surrounding buildings, resulting in one very upset farmer at the very least. So, there is definitely a time and a place for power, and for shooting paper targets to practice with in your garden or basement on a wet day, you don't really need a 50 cal high-power sniper rifle. Neither do you need huge backstops for lighter-powered airguns to catch the shot. And of course, a ricochet from a BB gun is going to do a lot less damage than from a 44 cal or bigger. Now, you can still do some damage with airguns, undoubtedly, and they must be treated with full and utmost respect. But most airguns are less likely to do terminal damage as opposed to a firearm. So, power-wise, there are circumstances when an airgun has more than enough power and is more suitable than a firearm. Of course, there are still circumstances where only a firearm will do, but not always. Practice. Well, we've pretty much covered this off, I suppose. They are cheaper to get the practice time in. They can be used in places your full firearm can't, or at least wouldn't be as safe to do so. They may even be easier and less restrictive to carry in certain parts of the world. Of course, it allows you to practice gun discipline too, with lower risks, as we've already said. There are several different types of airguns available that also replicate the blowback action to still give you that feel. This particular part of airgun ownership will pretty much be crossed into by all other reasons for owning one along the way. There are hundreds of styles and types of airguns out there which mimic the real firearm so closely they are even very difficult to tell them apart at first glance. With all the same field stripping capabilities often as well. This makes them a lower cost option to buy a collection of styles and designs, and because of the lower costs involved, this means either a cheaper way of building a collection or a bigger collection. There are even airgun replicas that you can't get in real firearms versions anymore, certainly not new, at least not legally either. Collecting these can be really quite addictive. They can also be bought by reenactment groups and are not then subject to the same laws and rulings around firearms. And for filming or show purposes, it would be pretty impossible to tell the difference. The next real plus to me is the ability to give the younger members the skills, disciplines and safer practice times to get them interested into the sport. Remember, you don't just pick up a gun and enter the Olympics and win gold. It starts young, sometimes very young indeed. And you don't want to go around giving young shooters high-powered rifles. There are more than enough country songs around out there, including lyrics about how Billy got his daddy's gun. And they never end well. I know I started my girls into the sport with lower power Crosman and Gamo guns, and they never got hurt in spite of the odd ricochet from a tin can here and there. And they're still here today. And yes, they also love country music too. Then there is the sound of silence. Having had a house full of daughters, believe me, you start to appreciate silence. And the one thing airguns are is quiet. Well, quieter than most firearms, that is. And if they aren't, then adding a silencer to them is not a difficult task or an expensive thing to do, resulting in better relationships with the neighbours and others in the vicinity as well. Oh yes, I did say silencer, by the way, and not moderator or suppressor. That's not right! That's not right! I don't really care what anyone wants to call them. I just know the original patent stated silencer. But I don't mind. Call them what you like. The point is, it makes an already quiet gun even quieter, very easily and quickly. Which, by the way, means the second rabbit, rat or pigeon is still there, ready for your second shot quite often. So, win-win. Now, adding silencers or moderators or suppressors to firearms can often be illegal in many places or requires a license at least in others. So, win-win-win, I suppose, again for the airguns. Small vermin then. No, not the kids. Rats, rabbits and the like. In situations like these, a high-power firearm would be more than overkill. Pardon the pun. It would most likely be ridiculous. So again, in tighter, smaller spaces with smaller vermin, a lower-powered airgun will be more than enough to take out those small pests. And up to about 100 yards, there are plenty of higher power versions out there if you need it. There are even airguns with power adjusters on them to increase or decrease the power output. Try finding those on firearms. Yes, as I've already said, if you're wanting to take wildebeest out on the Serengeti plains, leave your airgun at home. But in your backyard, you can take out the pests in silence without the need to explain to the police when they come after the neighbours have phoned because they've heard a firearm discharged. And you're also able to keep the projectile within your boundaries a lot easier. And last but not least, the ease of ownership. Airguns are, in most countries at least, easier to obtain than real firearms. Some places need very little, some need simply proof of age, i.e. over 18, and I realise some will actually need a full permit to obtain. But generally, wherever you are, it's easier to get an airgun than a full firearm. Again, this is not the platform to start complaining about local laws. That is better off being taken up with your local authorities or respective government. And, as we have already said, the ammunition is also very much easier to obtain, usually. So, whilst this is not and never was intended as a firearms versus airguns review particularly, hopefully even the most hardened firearms owners or shooters can see a time and place where an airgun would likely as not be the better option. Not always, but certainly on occasions. And if I'm right, most of the guys with real firearms started out with BB guns, or as the Americans prefer me to say, BB guns. And in places where they're not allowed, maybe there's a good enough reason that firearms should be restricted more. But please don't just class airguns as toys, because believe me, some of them definitely are not. Hopefully you've enjoyed this. If you have, it helps us greatly if you give the thumbs up button a prod. Whilst you're at it, subscribe, click the alarm bell. Don't forget to subscribe to our sister channel, AAR at Drapers. Until then, stay safe. Don't forget the other half's birthday and take that exercise you've been promising. See you next time. Thanks for watching.